We all know that the quarterback position is the most important on the football field, and this quarterback class in 2025 has the potential to be one of the best in a really long time. So how does Notre Dame quarterback commit Deuce Knight stack up compared to the other top quarterbacks in this class? It's all coming up in today's edition of Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Tuesday, June 25th. And thank you for getting your Tuesday started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And this show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, this is your reminder to please give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and of course, subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down and sports stop sporting like we want them to, this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Okay, in just a moment here, I'm going to be joined by Locked On recruiting insider Brian Smith to provide the latest on Notre Dame quarterback commit Deuce Knight after he went off at the Elite 11 finals this past weekend. And if you don't know what the Elite 11 finals are, don't worry. We got you covered here on today's show. It was an opportunity for Deuce to go up against some of the other best quarterbacks in the entire country, and by all accounts, he absolutely showed out at the event. Also, we get into the other most important developments for Notre Dame now that the recruiting dead period is here. They just capped off a very important month in the month of June, and the Irish have some serious momentum as we head towards the end of summer here. So it was a great episode, great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope you will too. Check it out. Locked On recruiting insider Brian Smith is back with me here on the first day of a month-long recruiting dead period on the NCAA calendar. But as we know, Brian, recruiting news never really stops in this day and age, so let's get right into it. This past weekend, the top quarterback prospects in the country got together just a few miles down the road from me in Manhattan Beach to participate in the Elite 11 finals. Notre Dame commit Deuce Knight was one of the quarterbacks who competed in the event. But before we get to Deuce, can you explain what the Elite 11 is and why it's such an important event in the recruiting industry?
It has many different layers, but it's been around a long time. Most of the guys you see in the NFL went to Elite 11 in some capacity, whether regional or the finals. And it's a skills competition where they put you through a myriad of drills, situations, chalkboard, talking about situations that relate to the actual game, not just throwing the ball. Pass rush, how you avoid it, ball control, using your footwork properly, being consistent, all that stuff. They throw it all at them in an afternoon for the regionals. And in the finals, it's 3 days. And it's a gauntlet of stuff too. But you also got to add in the media. Like, it's different when you've got 20 guys sitting there watching you from 15 feet away. I've seen kids wilt before my eyes. So that's part of the evaluation process. So if you're good at all those things and with the media there in the finals, that's important. And sometimes kids actually go up in the rankings because of it or down. There's a lot of different evaluation tools, and it's probably the most covered event in the country.
I appreciate that explanation because as I was looking more into it, I was like, wow, there's actually a lot about this, and specifically the regionals and how guys qualify and all things like that I didn't even know about. So I was like, okay, let's get that out of the way at the beginning so that all the listeners and viewers understand what it is that we're talking about here. But as for Deuce, it has been widely reported that he was one of the top players at the finals. What have you seen and heard about Deuce's performance against some of the other top quarterbacks in the country?
Basically, he's more consistent, and he's getting more consistent, just not just overall, but like week to week. It's been crazy how much better he's got since I saw him at the regional in the state of Mississippi. He had moments where he was good, but he had moments where he completely missed too. He's reduced those. He's been more consistent with his motion, and everybody's impressed. Like, his arm strength is insane. I don't know if you saw the video of him with the long
yards.
Yeah, like, he's got a cannon, and I knew he could do that kind of stuff, but it's different seeing it. And he's also still the guy that can vertical over 42 inches. You know, he's 6'4.5", 210 or whatever. Those are not normal measurables, even for an NFL guy, let alone somebody got a year left of high school. So now that he's getting that consistency down and everybody saw it, all the different analysts ranked him in the top 5. It's a good bet that he's got a chance to be on the cusp of a 5-star before this is all over, and he's earned it. So good for him.
I was reading an article this morning from Bruce Feldman of The Athletic, and he mentioned that several coaches who were in attendance believe that this class of quarterbacks is one of the most impressive in the 25-year history of the Elite 11. How would you assess this group of quarterbacks as a whole? Not necessarily specific to the guys who competed at the Elite 11, but just the class of 2025.
There just seems to be so many more players that have been through quarterback training off to the side, which ironically, until recently, Deuce had not. He's just getting started with that. He's only done it for a few months. But there are so many guys that are advanced mentally, understanding concepts, post-snap reads, way more than they used to be. I even talked to Dilfer about this a couple of years ago. He was seeing more and more of it. He used to be the leader of that group. Now he's at UAB as the head coach. But it's just different. The kids aren't as raw coming into it because they've been trained forever. Juju Lewis, probably the greatest example. In 7th grade, I knew who he was. Like, that's not normal. And he's a kid that's going to enroll a year and a half early wherever he goes to school because the only thing he's ever wanted to do is play quarterback, and he's earned it. That's the mentality now. Everybody's spending tons of money to get these kids advanced, not only physically but mentally, to play the quarterback position, which I assume you agree is probably the hardest one in sport. And it's just different than what I even saw 3-4 years ago. Everybody is able to do things on the run better. They materialize everything in their head faster, and the processing just makes it a lot of fun.
One interesting thing about the Elite 11 finals this year is, for all the talk about how great the quarterbacks were, the top-ranked quarterback prospect, Bryce Underwood, who's committed to LSU, wasn't even in attendance for the event. And as I mentioned, he's not just the number one quarterback, he's the number one rated player overall in the class of 2025. But how would you rank Deuce compared to the other quarterbacks in the class? You said potentially top 5. We know he's still a developmental prospect, has a long way to go, whereas some of the other guys might be more of a finished product. How would you rank him?
It's a really interesting concept. I've had this conversation with a few people. I don't know how you would do it unless you said, okay, what scheme are we running? Because Deuce does not fit the West Coast offense. You know what I mean? Like, he's not going to be a precision guy, at least not yet. But anything that moves the pocket or has the opportunity to let him run bootlegs and waggles, he could be a top 3 guy in the class. Him and Bryce would probably be the 2 guys that would kind of go to the top. The Keelan Russell kid, whatever, is going to Alabama. Another guy that can move. He's from Duncanville. He was great at the event. Elite 11 actually named him the winner. Anybody like that is who I would compare him with. Top 5 overall, probably now, especially since he was so consistent at Elite 11 finals. I could see it, but again, like, if I'm running a West Coast, give me Juju Lewis, somebody that's just super accurate. But Notre Dame's offense is going to be multiple, and for what they're running, he's an A-plus fit. That's probably the most important thing to look at.
It's interesting that you bring up his private quarterback training and the fact that he didn't start that until recently, because one big takeaway from a lot of people in watching Deuce at the Elite 11 finals compared to what he did at the regionals is that he looks a lot more polished as a passer. I don't think that's a coincidence, the fact that he's getting more intense training. So could you give us any insight into the advanced type of training that he's going through nowadays, and also how that has led to his improvements as a passer?
Well, the biggest thing with him, when I saw him at the regional in the state of Mississippi, his elbow wouldn't be in a consistent position. Like, he would move it and the ball would go high, low, etc. Just from watching him at the OT7 finals a few weeks ago, way different. Why? I'm assuming it's the training, but he just also looked more relaxed. If he missed a throw, it was okay. If he made a money ball, same demeanor. When you can do that from play to play, you're going to be much better off. So his psychiatric look at the field is different, because he would press sometimes at the Elite 11 regional. He still played well, especially the back half. But early on, like, he was forcing the ball. Elbow would move, it would drop, etc. Now it's just consistent. Deep balls, short, intermediate, and he's got a cannon. He barely even has to use his legs to throw a 20-yard rope. Like, it's, he could have been a Major League Baseball pitcher with his arm strength. He has that kind of velocity. I think that's the biggest thing. And again, like, his follow-through has been good and all that, but when that elbow's in the right spot, it's a dime.
It's funny because this time last year, you and I were basically having similar conversations about a Notre Dame quarterback commit in the Elite 11 with CJ Carr. And I understand why fans are so excited about Deuce Knight. Believe me, I am too. But now I'm starting to see some fans say that CJ Carr is going to be usurped, for the lack of a better word. Maybe I think I've been watching too much like Game of Thrones and House of Dragon lately, so that's the first word that came up to mind. But as the next superstar quarterback to come out at Notre Dame. I think they're both extremely talented, but at very different points in their development. How would you compare and contrast CJ Carr in high school, not necessarily now because he's been with Notre Dame for a little bit, compared to where Deuce is at currently?
Polar opposites. When you're growing up and your grandfather has a national championship ring as a head football coach at Michigan, you're going to be so much more advanced with the technological parts of the game, just knowing how everything works with film breakdowns and doing all that stuff. It's completely different. There's no way to put it. But he's also a guy that is actually probably not given enough credit with his ability to improvise. A few of the plays that I was told that CJ did great this spring is when the front side didn't work out. He had to bail and just create. Now, he's not going to run as fast as Deuce or jump as high, but he'll make awkward throws and all that. The difference with Deuce is if there's no throw at all, he can still score. I saw that in a game last year where his receivers got annihilated and his offensive line was a sieve. They weren't very good. And he just decided to run for an 80-yard touchdown. That works too. So I don't think there's much comparison between them, except they get the ball to the end zone. Deuce is just later arriving to this stuff on the chalkboard. And now that he's starting to catch up with that, there's really nothing he can't do. He has like the gifts to be the first pick in the draft. So it's up to him how good he ends up being.
As someone who's lives nearby in the South, what can you tell us about the quality of competition that Deuce is going up against in season, right? Like he was going up against some of the top quarterbacks in the country at the Elite 11 finals, so he's had a chance to really showcase his skills compared to other top guys, but it seems like when I watch him on film, there's really not that many guys in the field who are anywhere close to him.
Yeah, I've talked to him about that. I actually did a few weeks ago. And to put it in perspective, he plays in southeastern Mississippi. It's 45 minutes, give or take, from Mobile, Alabama, right there on the coast. And he's just basically in a cow pasture. Like that area is just a bunch of cows, like for real. Like when I drove into the town to go to the game, I'm like, wow, like there's nothing here. And there's not. He didn't deny it. There's no way to deny it. And the competition's pretty mediocre. You got to go to Jackson or one of the other cities in the state of Mississippi to see a consistent amount of talent. The game I went to was against Picayune Memorial. They had one kid, Jamonte Waller, going to Auburn, etc. And Deuce's team couldn't handle him. He had a couple of guys that could play college, but like none of his linemen were 6 foot, literally. Like that's not a good start.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. But like, you have to take advantage when you can. And when he can dominate a play, he does. So that's how I evaluate it. Like he's not playing in the Trinity League out there where you live. He's not playing in the Miami Public League. He's not playing against the private schools in Broward County, just outside Miami. He dominates when he can, but sometimes like it's a joke watching him run by guys. It's kind of like a video game.
We'll be right back with Brian to provide the latest on Deuce Knight's commitment status with Notre Dame. But before we get to that, I wanted to tell you about a really cool new promotion from our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing quite like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right. I know some fans are going to get mad at me for asking you this, but look, you live in the South. You're well connected with a lot of schools in the SEC, and clearly people on the Ole Miss side think that they have a chance of flipping Deuce. I feel and have always felt that Deuce is going to sign with Notre Dame. But what is the latest you've heard about Deuce Knight and his commitment to Notre Dame?
This is very simple. If Gino Guidugli is at Notre Dame, he will sign with Notre Dame. This isn't about schools. It's the same thing that I tell everybody, and fans get irate about this, but it's never going to change. Kids pick coaches, not schools. You can throw all the things you want at the TV. That is not changing. Gino is the reason he picked Notre Dame. He loves Gino, period. He's an elite recruiter. He's a good coach, obviously, but that's the connection. If Gino's at Notre Dame, he's going to Notre Dame. End of story.
I'm really surprised by that. Not to say that I don't believe in Gino Guidugli, but I feel like, when we talk about the best recruiters at Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman kind of occupies all of the oxygen in that conversation, and for good reason. Like, he's a tireless worker on the recruiting trail, We've seen him with Deuce Knight a lot, but the fact that it was Gino Guidugli, could you share any insight just from talking to Deuce about their relationship? Because also, even though Mike Denbrock sort of came in late in this recruitment because Jared Parker was the offensive coordinator last year, it feels like he's also talked about him a lot, but you're telling me that Gino is the guy in this recruitment.
When I went to see Deuce last year, we're out on the field, they're just warming up. And we're just talking about recruiting and football in general. And he kept bringing him up and I didn't ask. When it's unsolicited like that, that's a little different. And then I dug into it and he just said, Gino, I said, what is it about Gino? And he said, I can call him up anytime and we can talk about anything. Deuce is a really quiet young man. So he doesn't trust in a lot of people. And for whatever reason, they've just connected. Now he likes Marcus and all this other stuff. And I assume he likes Denbrock. I've never asked him about Mike, but it's Gino that got the ball rolling. And I'm not saying if he left, they couldn't get him, but the chances would be diminished. Again, kids pick the coach, not the school, 9 times out of 10, and that's conservatively. Gino is the reason.
Was Gino just on him really early? Because it did feel like when Notre Dame first started recruiting Deuce Knight heavily, he was not the Deuce Knight that we know now. He has certainly skyrocketed up the recruiting ranks because he's a very raw prospect. As you mentioned, he plays for a very small school in Mississippi. So at the time it was like, this is kind of interesting. And now he's like a top 5 quarterback potentially in this class. And a lot of credit is owed to the Notre Dame coaching staff for being on him so early. Was that a Deuce Knight, was that a Gino Guidugli call compared to the other coaches on Notre Dame?
I'm not sure how they do the offer and all that stuff. That'd be a great question for Marcus. Does he have to sign off on quarterbacks or how does he do it? But to my knowledge, that's one of the first guys that Gino liked. I've never inquired about it, but you're right. They were in on him very, very early. So was LSU and Tennessee and a bunch of other schools too. They just really recruited him hard. It was him and McIntyre and a couple other guys. And now kind of looking at it, I really don't think it's that close. Deuce Knight's upside is way higher. I've seen McIntyre. He's not even anywhere near as good as Deuce as a prospect. So I think Notre Dame did well.
All right, that was a lot of quarterback talk. But now that Notre Dame has finished a very eventful month of recruiting, as I mentioned at the top of this, this is the first day of the recruiting dead period. I'm sure all of the coaches, Notre Dame staff, as well as all the other staffs from around the country are very happy that the dead period has finally come. What do you think are the most important developments for the Irish after the month of June?
Well, number one, you got to keep your guys that are already committed. Taylor obviously is a part of that, and that's something that will probably get untethered over the time of the next few months. I don't expect anything there to come to a head. He's a 5-star kid. He can pretty much go on his own timeline. That's just the reality of it. Beyond that, they got a chance to really finish strong with the kids still on the board. Receiver, Tunick Hines, they got a great shot. Derek Meadows, they got a great shot, etc. They need to get these kind of guys on the outside. It's been Notre Dame's Achilles heel the last few years, obviously. And they got a great shot at getting arguably as good a linebacker class as there is in the country, too. Wu, as I call him, Owusu Boateng, and I'm not sure how you pronounce the other kid's name. Faramo, I believe it is, but he's awesome. He's a kid from out your way at J. Sarah. If they can get those kids and maybe get one or two others, I think they would be in pretty good shape. This probably is going to end up a top 5 class from everything they're doing right now that's trending, but still a long way to December, too.
I was just about to say there's a ton of momentum right now, but December feels like an eternity compared to where we're at now. Like, it's great that they've got all this momentum after the official visits, but until these guys, especially guys like Wu and Manfremo and hopefully Derek Meadows, if these guys end up committing to Notre Dame and signing on the dotted line, that is a really great class. But in your mind, who do you think is the most important prospect left on the board for Notre Dame? Because I think there's different ways to look at it. On defense, obviously, adding either one of those linebackers would be great. To me, I think Derek Meadows is the most important, just given how Notre Dame has struggled at the boundary receiver position in recent years. But what do you think?
That's a great question. Meadows is not a lock, but I've seen him live, and he's at least 6'5". He is very freakish, the way he can jump and all that. He's state champion in Nevada and track. I'm not sure which one I would go with. Maybe Faramo, because I think he could play the Viper spot. That's another spot they don't recruit well. Let's be really honest. He could play there. And I just think he's a guy that could play all 3 spots. So I would probably go with him, but anybody that's left on the board, you got to consider Taylor as one of those too, because in my opinion, he's listed as he's not committed as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, that's just how I look at it.
No, I completely agree with you on that point, because I think he had a quote somewhere recently, and I apologize for forgetting who it was to, but he basically said that he has no timetable yet to make a final call. It's like, even if you're committed, if you need to make a final call, then you're not really committed. That means you're debating on where you're going to go to school. So I guess it's more encouraging that he's still technically committed to Notre Dame. Like, he hasn't officially announced decommitment, but I'm totally with you. I don't think there's anything set in stone there when it comes to Ivan Taylor's recruitment. But I hear your point. The Matt and Frabo point is interesting because you're right. Notre Dame has not recruited guys in the outside very well. They've tried to convert a couple linebackers, 2 defensive ends, including junior Tui Alamaka from Marcus Freeman's first recruiting class as a DC. They did it again with Josh Burnham, although Tui Alamaka was at Viper. Burnham is more of a strong side end. And now they might try to do it again with Madden. What do you think they see in his game that makes him a possible fit on the outside?
Twitchy. His first step, explosiveness. He's pretty long for his height, and he's just got natural power through his hips. He'll be able to fight with tight ends, running backs, offensive tackle, however they block him, better than most guys. And in Notre Dame's scheme is very complex because they run 3-man and 4-man. He's a guy that you can put on the field and expect him to play D-end, and they come out in something you don't expect, and then he has to shift, and he can do that too. So that versatility, Woo's that way too. He can play multiple spots. If you don't have linebackers like that can play edge and vice versa, you're probably going to struggle in today's game. Offenses have all the advantages. I think that he can play all 3, middle, weak side, and pass rusher. It's very rare to do that.
Yeah, I feel like Woo is more of a traditional linebacker. I think that he probably would make the most sense on the outside. How would you compare him to his older brother, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah? Because he was also a jack-of-all-trades linebacker. He could literally do everything, and he played – I think he technically played rover, but he kind of had his own position that no one else can really play because he had such a unique skill set. How does his younger brother compare to him?
They're both very athletic. The younger brother is bigger. He's 210, give or take. I don't know the older brother personally. I know the younger one. Woo is very, very good guy, loves football. One of the last times I was at IMG, then he was working out that night. He was out on the field like a half hour early, even before the rest of his teammates, doing his own, like, I don't want to say workout, but like stretching and doing different things, kind of like an NFL guy does. Like, he doesn't even see guys walking around him. There aren't many guys like he's a different dude when it's that time. So maybe he's got a little bit of his brother. His brother struck me as that type, but again, I don't know him. As far as the player, you're right. The older brother, like, his ability to cover in space against running backs and slots at his size, about as rare as it gets. And that's why he's a successful NFL guy. He can match up against different sides. I don't know if Woo can do that yet, but he plays the overhang position and will. Great blitzer. He's probably a little better downhill than his brother, and the brother's better in coverage. If I was to break it down to 2 areas.
Yeah, what JOK did in that first Clemson game in 2020 going up against Travis Etienne was one of the greatest performances by any Notre Dame defensive player in the country. And then, he was able to cap that off with his, like, I don't know if it's an interception return for a touchdown or like a fumble recovery, because he basically just caught a pitch, but that was unbelievable. So if Notre Dame gets anything close to that in his younger brother, that would be a huge win for the staff. But last question before I let you go here. In your mind, break down a realistic best case scenario for Notre Dame to close out this class of 2025.
The kids that are still on the board, they have a legit shot with all of them from the intel that I've heard. Woo, obviously, Ferramo, Meadows, it's probably Notre Dame or Bama. I'll take Bama with a receiver every time with their staff, but they've got several kids either committed or crystal ball. At some point, it's crowded. That one's the hard one. I think they're going to get Hines. And the Taylor thing I won't touch. I have no idea. I'm not messing with that until the end. They got to get him at the end. That's going to be a signing day deal, whether he says it or not, because once you open the gate, they're going to continue to come in. But Notre Dame, I mean, anything outside the top 7 in the rankings would be disappointing at this point. So, and they got a shot at top 5.
Do you think they'll get one, both, or neither of the linebackers that we talked about?
Both.
Well, hey, That's a good note to end it on. All right, man. Thanks as always for taking the time to join me here. I always appreciate it. Hopefully you get to enjoy some rest during this dead period, and I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, buddy. Take care.
This episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep a ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Tomorrow, we got Luke Smith back on the show, so make sure you tune into that. In the meantime, remember to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and you can give us a follow on social media. X account is at Locked On Irish. Instagram is at Locked On Irish Pod, and my personal X account is at Tyler, WOJCIAK. See you tomorrow.